Alright, today we're doing things slightly differently. It's St. Patrick's Day, so happy St. Patrick's Day. St. Patrick, the patron saint of Ireland, and we're gonna draw him how I see him. In the meantime, while I'm going through these drawings, I'm going to explain why I don't particularly like him, and why I don't think he necessarily had the best intentions going into his job. Or at the very least, a lot of the results of his actions were unfortunate, as it resulted in the Christianification of a lot of the myths I research, and it resulted in a lot of cover-ups of the Celtic religious system, which of course was paganist, but it covered up a lot of the Druids as well and how they lived their lives. So, we're gonna go through it today. This is a sketchbook, so I'm keeping it light and I'm keeping it merry, and I'm using a bunch of green and orange and yellow for obvious reasons, patriotic and whatnot. And yeah, let's see what we create. So yeah. Hi and welcome. If you're new, I go by Micron online and I illustrate scenes from Irish myths and legends. I do all of the research myself, which means sometimes it can be hard to research because the Catholic Church kind of did this immense cover-up over a lot of these myths in order to turn them into like the Christianized version and to spread a different message. And St. Patrick was the main person like kind of facilitating this, like self-inserting himself into a bunch of fan fiction, writing himself into all of these myths and legends in order to make it seem like the might of God was mightier and more impressive than any of the like gods and goddesses of pagan beliefs. So today I'm just gonna kind of go into why I dislike this guy for doing it and why he came to do it in the first place. So, who was St. Patrick, or Paddy, as we tend to call him? He was the patron saint of Ireland, and surprisingly was a real person with like a huge documented history. He was born in Wales in a Roman settlement back in the late 300s. Yeah, you heard that right, Wales, not Ireland. The patron saint of Ireland isn't Irish. Realistically, he's Roman first, Welsh second, and like part of the British Empire third. So let's blow that misconception out of the water. His father was documented to be Calpurnius, so his birth name was possibly Patriticus, but in his own journals he has only ever referred to himself as Padraig, which is the Irish version of Patrick. As a teenager, he was taken prisoner by raiders and sold into slavery. Yeah, Ireland purchased slaves. The majority of slaves we purchased were from the Scandinavians, and the majority of slaves we purchased from the Scandinavians were raided from the British Isles. So, St. Patrick, living in Wales, became a slave, sold to Irish. His job as a slave was a shepherd, so spending long times in complete isolation with just sheep around him. And that was like his whole teenage years. Antrim likes to claim he resided there, but it's way more likely that he was held captive in Mayo around this time period. Eventually, Patrick got a bit sick of it. He got a dream, or he claimed to get a dream from God, as you do. And in this dream, he was instructed to abandon his job and just walk until he reached a shoreline. And to be fair, he did. He walked until he reached the sea, which it's an island. You're gonna reach it eventually. And then he managed to bargain his way onto a ship back to England. Visited his home, but then decided to begin religious training. Because he got this dream from God, he thought it was a sign, and then decided, yeah, I'm going to become a priest, I'm going to begin religious training, which fair juice, took about 15 years of what I imagine is grueling study and hard work, and is my own personal version of hell. So good on him there, like fair juice. After that, he was assigned to Ireland on his dual mission. He was not the first person to be assigned to Ireland, and he was not not the first priest to be assigned to Ireland, but he had a really good understanding of the Irish culture. At the time, it would have been Celtic, and considering he was raised there through his teenage years as a slave, he understood a lot of the language and the traditional rituals and values, so he was able to use this knowledge and incorporate it into his preachings. One example of this is using bonfires around Easter, which coincides with seasonal festivals already present in Celtic beliefs. To the Celts, the symbol of the sun was an incredible good luck token and was seen as a god in its own right, so Patrick put symbols of the sun on the cross, creating the Celtic cross, to fit in with like these common pagan worshipping that was already present. Basically, Paddy said, hey, we believe in the same thing, just what you believe to be this, I believe to be God. And he was able to convert a lot more people doing that than if he were to turn around and say, no, I'm forcing you to ascribe to my religion. He was able to coax people and kind of persuade them into switching over and saying that, no, I'm saying it's the same, but like mine's a small bit better. So obviously people are going to switch to the one that is presented as a small bit better. His most famous preaching is why he's associated with shamrocks to this day. It's explaining the Holy Trinity. So basic idea of the Holy Trinity is that the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit are all separate things, and yet in and of themselves are all God. Using a shamrock, he was able to explain that each holy symbol was a power in its own, like the 3 leaves of a shamrock, but all together it's still a shamrock. It's not exactly the most complicated metaphor, but he was still able to blow people away, so he must have been a really charismatic guy. He spent most of his life in Ireland as a wanderer, converting people as he went from place to place, and all the time he kept journals to record his day-to-day, but they could get a bit crazy. He claimed to have raised the dead, at least 33 men, some far beyond the grave and some recently deceased. He made absolutely no mention of women though, so you know, that's where his priorities lie, I guess. Most other details from his life come from hagiographers, which is similar to a bibliography, but it's written by others as a potentially like idealized version of his accounts. So it can be hard to know what actually happened because St. Patrick kept writing wild stuff like he was slaying dragons and raising the dead, and then hagiographers that came after started writing some wild stuff like he chased snakes out of Ireland. That's fine. He's a bit wonky. Just a little bit. Coming to the snakes, let's have a look at these snakes. He didn't chase literal snakes. That would make him a very strange man indeed. But the myth is that St. Patrick chased all the snakes in Ireland into the Irish Sea where they never returned. Unfortunately, the snakes were an allegory for the Druids. Now, the Druids kept no records of their own, preferring instead to pass on teachings over word of mouth. Surprisingly, one of the only records we have of the Druids come from Julius Caesar. Now, if you've ever seen her at Asterix and Obelix, then you kind of can see where I'm coming from here. The Roman Empire had some problems around Gaul with, well, the Gauls, the French Celts. The Gauls were a Celtic tribe that refused to become a part of the Roman Empire, understandably, and they put up a significant fight against Caesar. In fact, Caesar himself, while he was emperor, absolutely never, completely eradicated the Gauls. It's from Caesar's written records and observations and spies that we learn about the Druids and their place in Celtic society as a whole. Unfortunately, we have no such records about Celts in Ireland, but knowing about how Celts in France ran their life and their households can teach us a bit of what to expect when we look at the Irish side of it as well. Now, Caesar wasn't exactly the best person, considering he wanted to spread that the Celts were dirty and horrible people who performed human sacrifices, and he created many nasty depictions of the depravity of the Celts. But he does note a few useful and possibly true things too. He notes that Druids studied ancient verse, natural philosophy, astronomy, and the lore of the gods, that Druids within Celtic societies were exempt from warfare, and that they judged quarrels and decreed penalties and took charge of religious ceremonies. a lot of what the Druids focused on was nature, and conducting rites in nature, in clearings and in forests. Gaul was unfortunately suppressed by the Romans in around 14 to 37 AD. Now, the furthest north the Romans ever got was England. They never came to Ireland because they called it Hibernia, the land of the eternal winter. Too cold and wet and stormy for the likes of good, respectable Mediterranean Romans. To be fair, the summers, are very different. And if they came in the winter, I imagine at least a lot warmer. Unfortunately, though, that's where the written trail of the traditions of the Celts end. The Druids believed in the magic of storytelling, so they didn't write anything down. They believed that spoken word was the best way to share information and worship the gods in the earth. Now, when we look at the Irish side of things, the main way of passing down these teachings was through music, and traditional music has been a huge part of Irish culture for millennia. Back in the day, while the Druids studied astronomy and the mysteries of the world, they believed music to be the most sacred form of all. Harp players in particular were held in the highest esteem. Druids believed that the best way to transfer information was through a song. The best way to remember these legends was through this catchy tune. The harp itself remained a symbol of Ireland to this day. It's a cultural emblem in its own right. It can be found on our euros and our passports. It's still a really prevalent emblem. Once Christianity became involved and St. Patrick started spreading the good word of the Lord, the gods and goddesses of old became the fair folk. Fairies rumoured to bring bad luck should you speak ill of them. These little devils hiding in the hills of Ireland. For this reason, it's really hard to identify even how many gods were worshipped in these times and what they all represented. Most Druids began to lose their social standing in Ireland as Patrick began inserting Christian ideals into these songs and stories of old, switching their meanings into pro-Catholic ideas and completely dismantling the teachings that the Druids were preaching beforehand. Myths about Fionn and the Fianna became myths about Fionn and the Fianna coming and asking St. Patrick for help with dealing with this big monster. Myths containing gods turned into myths containing the Fae, really devilish entities that trick humans and bring them ill will. And Paddy started inserting himself, slaying devils and monsters and, using the might of God to push back all of these Fae. This encouraged a lot of people to turn their backs on the Druids, seeing them as a symbol of this demonic magic. Some Druids began journeying out to the islands around Ireland, where traditions to this day are still the strongest, and the culture is a lot less influenced, and this was a way to avoid this persecution. Those who stayed got demoted to witch doctors and sometimes even Satan worshippers by the people they had been helping for centuries beforehand. So, all in all, St. Patty kind of sucked. If I've done my timing right though, should be St. Patrick's Day. So enjoy the holiday regardless. Paddy got what he wanted. He became immortalized as this pious and godly man who helped Ireland get rid of all of its impurities, the snakes, quote unquote. Christianity as a whole was still hugely influential into Irish culture in this day, and I wouldn't ever want to replace that. It is just a bit unfortunate that a lot of what I do is researching Irish myths and legends, or folk tales, or old stories, and they can be a bit hard to find because there are so many different versions of them floating around, because a lot of the time they were spoken, they were never written down. And so when St. Patrick got his hands on them, some people remember the original, some people remember St. Patrick's version, and some people remember some weird mix that has changed and developed over the years since. But yeah, all in all, that's why I'm not super fond of this guy. Enjoy the day regardless. Have a pint on me if you're of age, I guess. And if you're not of age, maybe have a non-alcoholic pint on me. Water is always good. Have a pint of water on me. Enjoy the rest of your day. I hope you enjoyed these little sketches. They helped me kind of piece together what I wanted to do for the short, which should be out around the same time. Yeah, they're not overly impressive, but when it comes to a sketchbook, I'm not really looking for overly impressive. I'm just trying to get a couple of ideas down to keep in mind what kind of composition I want to build and what kind of visuals I actually want to do. The final image should be on my Instagram, which is linked below if you would like to see it. I'll have a quick little flash up of it here as well. But thank you very much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.